The financial services industry is facing major forces reshaping it with fintech disruptors, cryptocurrencies, and new regulations. Building new offerings and consistently delivering excellent service levels are must-haves to effectively compete in that space. I'd like to welcome Jude Cadet, a senior systems engineer from Fiserv, to take us through their Redis journey and evolution as they were growing their global payments and services business. Jude, please.
Hi, my name is Jude Cadet, and I'm going to be talking about deploying and managing Redis in a hybrid enterprise environment. Currently, I work for Fiserv, and I am a senior systems engineer. I started off working as a Linux systems engineer, and then I was promoted to the platform architecture and engineering team. We've been using Redis for roughly about 5+ years, and currently I am the subject matter expert for all things Redis there. We handle everything from maintaining the entire Redis infrastructure from beginning to end to end, from idea to concept to deployment to day one to operations and end of life. So we assist with the developers with onboarding so that they get the exact needs that from Redis and from the resources that we provide for Redis for their applications. And currently, right now, we have 87 clusters for our entire environment. All of them ranging from 3-node clusters to 9-node clusters. And I think we're supposed to be deploying maybe some 13-node clusters in the near future. So as I mentioned earlier, I currently work for Fiserv. Fiserv is a global fintech and payments company with solutions for banking, global commerce, merchant acquiring, billing and payments, and point of sale. Fiserv currently is on Forbes Fortune 500 list. I think we're roughly slated to get near the Fortune 100 list eventually. We've been pretty busy. We have nearly 6 million merchant locations globally. We have 1.4 billion global accounts on file, and we have 12,000 financial transactions that run through our systems per second. If you want any more information about Fiserv, you can go to fiserv.com. So let's talk about digital transformation. Digital transformation is at the core of what we do. Fiserv is primarily a technology company that just works in the financial technology space. So digital transformation is what really drives us, especially as a leader in the space that we are. We have to push those new boundaries in order to make sure that we can provide, the service that's needed for the people that we serve, which is everybody. So as we began to grow at around 2017, we realized that traditional methods were not sufficient for what we wanted to do, for what we needed to provide for our clients. So we knew that there were bottlenecks, and in order to kind of overcome them, we decided to take a look at a few things. Some of the bottlenecks that we were looking at were that was offered by traditional methods were lower latency. We needed more speed and more bandwidth. We needed larger volumes, more volumes, and we needed to increase our time to market as far as providing applications and tools for all of our clients. So we also ran into one issue in which our Windows developers had an issue with App Fabric going end of life, and we were using App Fabric for our caching layer. So overall, we were looking for something that was just all-encompassing that can kind of take care of that, as well as other needs for other application platforms. So speaking with management and getting management sponsorship and their support and our chief architect, we decided to set some guardrails and define some standards as far as what we were looking for. So we were looking for something particularly rooted in open source. We needed something that was open source based, of course. We wanted something that was easy to deploy. We wanted something that provided a good level of scalability. And we definitely needed something that provided enterprise features such as ease of use and management tools and security. One of those tools that definitely helped us achieve this was Redis Enterprise. Our strength for Redis Enterprise definitely lies. Initially, we did not start as a cloud-based company. Fiserv has been around for 35 years, so we've continued to grow and change and adjust and push the boundaries as far as what we can technically provide in this digital age from the financial perspective. So we started with a strong on-prem presence roughly around 2017. And Redis has given us the flexibility and the resources and the services that we need so that we can provide top tier services for all of our clients. In the world of fintech, people want their money fast, and Redis has provided us a data platform layer that allows us to deliver those services at the speed of life itself. One of the things that was very important to us and allowed us to provide Redis Enterprise was that it was hardware agnostic. Redis Enterprise, you can deploy it on Kubernetes, you can deploy it on virtual machines, you can deploy it on bare metal systems. So one of the things that we chose to do, we chose to go with virtual machines. We ran into some issues with size limitations and just how to size out the virtual machines in order so that we can go ahead and use Redis Enterprise on it. But we were able to overcome that by Redis's flexibility with being able to scale it out in many different directions. Deployment ease, Redis is definitely easy to deploy, and it allows flexibility for us to be able to create tools and write scripts so that we can go ahead and deploy it in an easier manner or whatever fits us. We've been able to work with it so that we can deploy it in a manner that works out for our environment. One of the biggest things that really makes it very powerful when it comes to deployments is the API. Redis's API allows you to automate just about anything. You can automate database creations. You can automate geo-replicated databases. You can automate deploying clusters. You can automate adding nodes to clusters, scaling it out. And that's where it really, really stood out to us. So we've been able to make all kind of tools and write all kind of scripts too, so that we can go ahead and deploy it in a manner that was suitable for us. So Redis's high availability definitely has been very useful in our environment. We deployed it on virtual machines and we deployed it on Linux servers. So whenever we would go through our patching cycles, we would go ahead and deploy it using a script. And because we would enable high availability, at the very most, I think it would just give us roughly about 20-second timeouts or 10-second timeouts between as it would fail over from one node to another. So for the most part, it was relatively zero downtime whenever we ran upgrades, whenever we did our OS patching, and the high availability definitely suited our needs. Recovery, there's been a couple of issues where we've had to rebuild a cluster because a cluster may lose quorum. And in those cases, the recovery has been relatively smooth. We've been able to recover roughly under 10 minutes, but we've also added high availability and redundancy so that while we may have to recover one cluster, we'll be able to switch traffic over and fail over to another cluster and be able to keep the application up and running. So Redis provides multi-tenancy. Multi-tenancy has allowed us to create a shared environment so that we can deploy up to 10,000 databases in one cluster and provide that availability for applications that may want to take advantage of different data spaces. It provides a level of security so that no one data space will affect the other. So with active passive and active active, we started Redis using version 4.x. And during that time, there was only a process called replica of, which would allow you to do a one-way transfer of data from one database to another, from one cluster to another. Later on, they implemented CRDBs, which gave us the ability to have true active-active, in which there was a bidirectional sync of data between both clusters or both databases. So on-prem deployments has been wildly successful in our environment. Some of the reasons why was because the sizing requirements. We spent a meticulous amount of time and were really obsessive with the planning around sizing. We talked about the resources that we needed for sizing, such as RAM, CPU, and storage. Redis has it. Redis on Flash. Fiserv hasn't utilized it yet, but we've been able to get everything that we need just from Redis running on RAM. And the redundancy that is provided has been more than enough to allow us to not have any data loss. So from a database perspective for size and requirements, it all depends on what it's being used for. So in some cases, the databases were used as cache. Well, in a lot of cases, the databases have been used as a cache, in which we have to kind of size for the amount of data that's incoming against the amount of data that's outgoing, and make sure that that database won't get full. Sometimes we would be coming from another database platform that developers would be using for cache, in which we would have to kind of size out, take a look at what size the data is that they're currently using. Sometimes we would have to look at how large a table may be or how large a table row may be, and we have to kind of size it accordingly. So there's always definitely meticulous planning around the whole process. There still is, and that's just because we want to make sure that we can provide exactly what the developers need. Redis Enterprise has definitely given us the full flexibility so that we can be able to size these things out accordingly. So some of the availability requirements, once again, it truly depends on what the application needs are. So in some cases, if we're using it as a cache, then a lot of times we don't need to persist the data to disk because the data could be just throw a data, session data. The data is only live for just a session. But in some cases, if somebody's using it as a primary data store where they want to retain the data, then we may implement some of the things to make sure that the data is always available. And Redis also has, from a cluster perspective, Redis has always been relatively solid as far as availability for the database to be available to the applications. There's a lot of cases in which there will be issues with the application itself rather than Redis. One of the features that provides availability is replication, in which there is a failover copy for the database. So there's the primary copy that runs on one node, and should that node go down, then it will fail over to the failover copy and promote that to the primary copy. That has helped a whole lot, especially when it comes to our operating system patching days, so that Redis is continuously up and running and available. Geo-replication has definitely been a big help. It also we've been using it in an active way, in which the application is both actively taking traffic on both sides, and the data that's stored in Redis actively syncs between each other. And as far as an active-passive way, we've been using it as far as for disaster recovery, so that there's a warm standby with an application instance in our disaster recovery site. So one of the things for geo-replication, one of the requirements that are definitely necessary was to have two Redis clusters available, size relatively about the same size. You want to have the same version of Redis running on both sides as well, and there must be a decent WAN link between them. So let's talk about cloud deployments. And there was a time where Fiserv was never ever interested in going into the cloud. If anything, we were actually interested more as developing our own cloud platform on our own systems and on our own network and providing a cloud service. But things have changed, times has changed. And once again, like I mentioned about our whole core being about digital transformation, we feel that we have to take advantage of all of the tools that are available. So when it comes to the cloud vendors and when it comes to cloud deployments, there are so many different ways. Right now, it's an uphill climb for us. So we are looking at the different vendors. We are looking at ways that we can utilize things between all of the vendors so that we can avoid vendor lock-in. One of the things about cloud is we looked at self-managed and managed. So when it comes to self-managed, it's pretty much the same way as you would deploy it on-prem, in which you would deploy your instances, you would install Redis Enterprise on it, you would have to acquire a license. It would definitely give you much more flexibility and much more hands-in, so that you can kind of customize your installation the way that it would best suit you. But the downside with that is that there's a lot of micromanagement involved. So you will end up having to upgrade clusters if you need to, upgrade the versions, upgrade the software on your instances, depending on whatever you do. But there's a lot more micromanagement. As far as using managed instances in the cloud, it definitely gives you a way to be a little bit more lazier. The cloud vendors will take care of the infrastructure, they'll take care of the instances, and you would just select your needs as far as the sizes and different features that you can use with Redis or Redis Enterprise in the cloud. And they would just give you your endpoint, and you would just kind of rock and roll from there. So there's a lot of decisions that you have to make, and even beyond just that standard overlook of how it works in cloud with self-managed and managed, the different cloud vendors as well, AWS, GCP, as well as Azure, they all provide Redis in different ways, in different manners. AWS and GCP, they both use peering to Redis's cloud service. So when you deploy Redis through there, you will, in a managed instance, you will actually be creating an instance in Redis's cloud service. The cloud vendors take care of all of the billing. If there's any issues as far as troubleshooting or any issues with Redis in particular, they would refer you over to Redis Enterprise for their support. Azure works a little differently. So Azure actually allows you to deploy an instance in Azure, and they manage the hardware. They manage anything with Redis. They manage everything totally. One downside with Azure, even though there's less management from a managed instance aside, is that the smallest instance that you can get is 10 gigs. There's also the factor of cost calculation. Depending on how you deploy Redis, where you deploy Redis, how you deploy it, how you size it out, there's going to be many different pricing models. So I know all of the cloud vendors, they offer a cost calculator. So AWS and Azure, I haven't particularly worked it too much in GCP to really know, but those two vendors, they have cost calculators. So you can go ahead and price it out and check the features that you want so that you can actually do a cost comparison to see what suits your needs. One of the things that's definitely made Redis successful in our environment is dealing with resiliency. We use it for all of our database instances. We actually are able to provide a method that we can keep our applications running. Some of our applications depend heavily on Redis, so we are able to keep it running. During the 4.x days, as I mentioned, there was replica of, which was a one-way replication, and whether you used a cluster database or not, that was the only way that you can actually copy or back up or do some sort of syncing with a database in Redis. As you can see, there is HA available, in which we discussed earlier about the primary and the replica copy. So the one thing that really helped us out a lot was the geo-replication. A couple of years back, we actually had a merger with First Data. So before that, we were mostly using our geo-replicated databases in an active-passive fashion, in which we were using it for disaster recovery. But the years later, we have more data centers, we have much more deployments of Redis. The geo-replication has definitely been a game changer. We have applications that are running active, accepting traffic on both sides, and the sync has been very important and very helpful for getting these applications out. As far as when it comes to cloud, the data resiliency that you'll get when it comes to self-managed, it's the same way as on-prem, in which you deploy 2 instances, and you can go ahead and set up your geo-replication or set up your primary and replica databases using replication. As far as managed, the only way that you can get geo-replication with Azure is to use the Enterprise or the Enterprise with Flash tiers. So let's talk about application migration from on-prem to hybrid. Fiserv's approach, as mentioned, we never wanted to deal with the cloud at all, but here we are. So Fiserv is always changing, always growing, always looking to push the boundaries. So we have to grow. So we've been able to use Redis, and we've been able to migrate data from on-prem to cloud vendors in a very easy fashion. We've been using geo-replication. We've been using replica of. And it's definitely a simpler strategy with the technology that Redis brings. So we've been able to migrate as needed in the way that we want to. Besides using Redis just for migrating data, you can use it as a true multi-active environment. This would require you to use self-managed instances. You can create a self-managed instance across all the cloud vendors. And you can enable geo-replication. Add a database, a geo-replicated database, and doesn't matter who your cloud vendor is, you'd be able to actively sync your data among all of those platforms. We're not using this technology yet, but as I said, Fintech is ever changing. Fiserv is always pushing the boundaries and always growing. So we're probably not too far from actually using this strategy. Coming back to digital transformation, for us, it means to push the boundaries. It means to provide the best service we can in whatever way we can. And we're always definitely meticulously planning, always looking at what's the best way possible. And even if it's not available yet, we may try to find a way, try to develop it. One of the things that has been great is that Redis Enterprise has definitely been there in lockstep along with us, providing technologies that work with the way we like to work. Thank you for listening to my talk. Thank you to Redis for providing me the platform so that I can go ahead and explain how Fiserv is using Redis. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Jude, for taking us through the selection criteria and your Redis Enterprise journey. The flexibility to deploy Redis Enterprise anywhere and on platforms like Kubernetes play an important role in building architectures that support the business as it evolves and helps avoid vendor lock-ins.